Good afternoon, folks, for another Monday edition of CPAC Live from here in Alexandria, Virginia, just south of Washington, D.C. We've got a great show for you. You can always watch us at live.conservative.org. Check us out on the CPAC Facebook page and, of course, Periscope on Twitter at CPAC. And, of course, to our friends joining us on Big Marker and Parler, or as I've been told, is Parlay, which is the new hip platform that we're taking advantage of. Thanks to all of our friends who have followed us over the past week on that platform. We're going to be taking advantage of that over the next few months as we head into November. Our second guest today, we're going to talk with Dr. Karlyn Borysenko, who is a liberal, folks, a liberal who came to CPAC 2020 and wrote a wonderful article about her experience there. But first, it gives me great pleasure, and it's a real honor to introduce our friend, former CPAC Blogger of the Year, one of the hardest working men in American media who has redefined the game, Wayne Dupree of WayneDupree.com. Wayne, how are you?
Mr. Ian Walters, thank you. Thank you for having me. And CPAC, you know, I owe so much to the organization. So thank you for having me. Thank you.
It's so nice to see you here on the screen in front of me, but I really am looking forward to the day where we're going to be in the same room.
Oh yeah.
And I can see that mug of yours, and we can smile at each other in person. I know it's right around the corner, but we all miss you tremendously. Look, WayneDupree.com, you have been doing this digital content thing way before anybody else was doing it. We got into the game as some of the lockdowns began happening right after CPAC because we wanted to stay in touch with members of our CPAC families, our CPAC community. But you built your own operation several years ago that includes a written content form, sort of a blog is what we call it, a video component, a broadcast component, in an era where it seems like the major broadcast networks are not getting the job done as far as giving accurate information to their audiences, when print organizations are getting closer to propaganda items for the left. How do you find yourself enjoying this moment, given that you've been such a leader at creating this forward-thinking economy of alternative broadcasting and news and information programming?
You know what, Ian? Thank you for reminding me of all the stuff that I did. You know, when I first started back in 2000, well, I left the Democratic Party in 2007, but when I first started my podcast or being even on radio was in 2012. And it was hard for me to get on different platforms. Different platforms had their specific people, and they weren't letting anybody else on. And I was like, but there's so many more voices out here that there needs to be another platform. So then I created War Radio, which was We Are America Radio. And I hosted it, used my 401k money and everything, but we had like 21 shows on, you know, I was happy. I was happy to do that. Facebook and Twitter. I used to be afraid of Twitter because it was so fast. You know, Facebook was a little bit easy. You know, you just post your stories up there, but Twitter was a little bit fast. And then you have all the other platforms. And to me, my mindset was you can't put all your eggs in one basket. You can't marry one platform and leave everybody else out. And so not only did I add Twitter, but any other new platforms that I would see coming out there, message boards, aggregators, different things like that, I would go and see if I could get my website or get my shows or get anything that I was doing on that. And the numbers start increasing because my belief is when you think about or when you have a voice and you have something to say, there's a whole lot more people out there that believe and think just like you. And they're easy to follow and easy to share because they feel, you know what, I can't say it, but he can. So let me share what he is saying And then I have a voice because he's going to, and my world start opening up. But it was week after week after week. My world was opening up with different opportunities. So like I was saying before, what gives me great satisfaction and accomplishment today is when people talk to me and say, you know what, I've been watching for so long. I remember when you were using this certain platform and then you change, and we use that platform and we change too.
Right.
Or, we see how your website, like we just cracked 7 million page views this month for WayneDupree.com. 7 million page views.
When Rush Limbaugh became popular in the late 1980s, early 1990s, it created a whole economy of conservative talk radio. And you really are one of the forefathers of digital conservative programming. You've been doing so well, and you've become such a leader in this space that you had an opportunity last week to sit down with President Trump and talk about some of these important issues that may not be getting talked about in the right ways in mainstream outlets. They're certainly not getting talked about the right ways in the New York Times and in the Washington Post. We had a great show about that last week with Charlie Giroux. Tell me, what was that conversation like, and what sort of ideas did you guys exchange at that meeting?
Hopefully, and believe me, it was a great honor to be called and a great honor to sit right beside the man. I mean, we sit beside him. But no, after the introduction, the main thing that I wanted President Trump to understand from my viewpoint is I've never seen a Republican president that went into the minority community. And I remember in 2016, President Trump, Ben Carson went into Detroit, and they got out of the car and walked on the street. That's something that a Republican president I don't even remember seeing Republican candidates for presidents do that. What I wanted him to do was do it again, especially in this day and time, because he's being attacked by Democrats, some Republicans, the media, Hollywood. He's being attacked so much more in this period. He needs to show his face in a place a little bit more. Like last year when the thing about Cummings here in Baltimore, there were so many people on the street that said, we wish President Trump would come here because I support him. Can you believe? Just imagine, just for a few seconds, if President Trump was to leave Washington, come here to Baltimore, and just walk on the street with, his security, but shake hands and talk to people. How much greatness that would have done, even just for a few minutes. So, that's one of the main things that I wanted to get across to President Trump. There are a lot more voices out here, minority voices that support you. They just have to have a little bit more of a connection with you.
Let me ask you to contrast. I learned we were on a CPAC panel together back in February, and you sort of spoke about your upbringing and the spiritual side of your youth, growing up in a religious household with your dad. Compare and contrast the protest movement that's happening out in Lafayette Park right now and happening across America with perhaps that civil rights movement that you and I were both raised in the late 1960s. The first thing that comes to mind is the idea of nonviolence. Back in the 1960s, when they were the civil rights movement was committed to nonviolence. That's obviously not the case today. True. When you hear some of the cheers and some of the songs that they sing, it's profanity laced. These days, but in 1960s, it was religious music. They were singing hymns, I shall not be moved. All of these wonderful tunes that we grew up with. Let me hear your thoughts about the difference between what happened in the 1960s and what's going on today.
I honestly believe that in the late 1950s and 60s protests, they were more based in your soul. these things needed to change, and people felt it deep down in the soul. That's where a whole lot of the respectful protests that were happening showed America that the bully was needed to be stopped because the victims had had enough. That's what was portrayed when TV, and because TV was still young at the time.
Right.
When America saw the bullies putting those hoses on those Americans, on those Black Americans, when the dogs were sick on those Black Americans, America couldn't stand it. But now what you have now is you got these kids that don't even look to even find guidance in what happened in the 60s to learn and build on. They don't know anything about it because, again, like I said, they aren't even trying to learn anything about it. So they're just going off of what they've seen in Hollywood, what they've seen in these new historical written videos, and they're trying to build off the emotion instead of substance. They don't have substance. That's why, at first they're knocking down statues of Confederates, and now they're just knocking down anybody's statues because it's emotional to them. It feels good, and they aren't getting pushback. They aren't getting repercussions. Where back in the day, the result was better laws for Black Americans. We could eat at the same counter. We could walk in this. We could walk in the library together. Things were being changed because of that type of protest. But now today is like, man, these kids are crazy.
There was a leader who was interviewed on one of the Sunday shows. I'm not sure if you saw it. Mr. Hawk Newsom was interviewed by Chris Wallace. And he seemed to reflect in his mind a lot of the anger that was going on. But what was very interesting in the interview was that they pulled up a TED Talk that Mr. Newsom had done a couple years ago. And his message just 2 years ago in 2018 was one of peace and nonviolence, and sounded like you sound, a questioning of one's soul. 2 years later, flash forward to just last Sunday, and he is spreading a message of a far more militant message, one that says if we don't achieve the policy prescriptions that we are proposing, then we're going to take down the entire proposition. What do you think has changed in the past 2 years that has caused this outpouring of uncontrollable anger from a lot of left-wing activists?
There's an undercurrent. There are individuals underneath all of this. I mean, the fire is burning on top, but there are people underneath that are trying to destroy the Trump presidency. They've been trying to do it from the beginning. They're angry. They're mad at the American people because the American people decided that they weren't going to follow the media script anymore. You remember back in the day, the media would only put on certain people that they believe that should be president or should be in the race. They weren't putting on outsiders that much. That's why so many people say a third party candidate doesn't have a chance. President Trump came up, and the media was like, he won't be president. He will. And President Trump was like, okay, I'll tell you what. Let me talk to the American people. Let me. And this undercurrent, these people with the agenda, they're angry at the American people because we chose not to follow their script or follow their indoctrination to choose Hillary Clinton or to choose a politician from the Senate or the House to be president. They're angry, and they are going at all stops. If they have to use racism, if they have to use fire sticks and pitchforks to burn this country down, that's what they think is going to do. That's what they think that will work, but it's not going to work. President Trump has done so much, okay? And I mean, look, sometimes I have to shake my head at what he does put out, but he is in his heart I truly believe that man loves this country more than anybody, and he wants this country to be better. And we should all have that attitude. But like I said, it's that undercurrent, and it's it's those people that have come together, and they are they're firing on all cylinders right now. They're just chaos, problems, all that stuff is being thrown in.
Wayne, I am a firm believer that if we were looking at President Hillary Clinton
Yeah,
or Republican nominee or President Jeb Bush, that both you and I would not have the seat at the table that we
right.
have in the Trump administration.
I agree.
Still be the same old establishment forces trying to limit your voice, trying to limit my voice. And boy, it's good that regular folks like you and me have an opportunity to be heard, and that's something I know you're grateful for, and I'm grateful for too. Tell our CPAC audience where they can watch the Wayne Dupree Show, where they can read all of the great content that comes out of WayneDupree.com before we let you get out of here.
That's it, WayneDupree.com. You can visit, bookmark, and share. And like I said, we just went over 7 million page views this month, which is a new record for us. So we are continuing to find stories and give our opinions, and we appreciate everybody that visits. You can find me on social media. Type in Insta Tweet Google Face. That's all of them. Wayne Dupree Show. Insta Tweet Google Face. Wayne Dupree Show. Well, you have to break them down, but just put Wayne Dupree Show right after that. And you can also download my podcast on any of the podcast platforms. Just type in Wayne Dupree Show. And one more thing, and I'm usually bad at this, leave a review. Let me know what you think about the shows in the review sections of those applications. God bless.
Folks, let's help Wayne Dupree get to 8 million viewers in the month of July. Thanks for taking some time out of your busy day, and we will holler at you in the next couple of weeks to check up and see how you're doing, Wayne. Thanks for being here. Check out this very brief video that features our next guest, Dr. Karlyn Borysenko.
It's so funny. I really enjoy having these conversations because it's weird. It's like there's this sort of matrix. Like I will talk to, even some of my friends or some people I know who are, more liberal or more left leaning or whatever, and they just totally don't see the intolerance on that side, right? If I mention, any, racism or any type of intolerance or bigotry or bullying, like you just said, or abuse, right? People are always like, yeah, it's those nasty right wingers, Trump supporters, And for literally over a decade, I've always thought the opposite, right? And I know, I see the stuff that gets sent to me, and less than 5% of it is from anyone on the right. Right? It's right. All I'll go to the profile. It's all pronouns in bio, communist flags, rainbow flags, vote Bernie, pro labor, all this stuff. Right? Every single time someone calls me like a racial epithet, or someone just says something really horrible to me, and sometimes it's not even on my political posts. It's just generally, and even before that, it's just something I'd always sort of noticed myself. It's like, yeah, sure. Is there racism on the right side of the spectrum? No question. Yes. And in fact, the extremists on that side are less numerous, but probably more dangerous, if that makes sense, right? I think that there are.
And we're back with CPAC Live, folks. It gives me great pleasure to be able to introduce to our CPAC audience Dr. Karlyn Borysenko, who is an organizational psychologist, an executive coach, writes for Forbes.com, and her claim to fame most recently was that she attended a Trump rally as a former Democrat, I think, and also came and attended the most recent CPAC 2020. Dr. Borysenko, how are you this afternoon?
Well, thank you for having me. And I was actually still a Democrat when I attended the Trump rally, but I am no longer a Democrat anymore after that.
What compelled you to go check out that Trump rally?
I live in New Hampshire, and in New Hampshire, we're very lucky and spoiled. And I got to see every major politician on the Democratic side that was running for president at one point or another. And I just thought, why not go to a Trump rally? Trump was coming to town, and I thought, at the very least, it's going to be an absolute spectacle, and I'll have a great time.
Politically speaking, I mean, one of the ways that we were able to recognize the energy back in 2016 were that these rallies were like NFL tailgates, somewhere between a rock concert and a new iPhone being released, with people lining up around the block for not just hours but a couple days in order to get that seat in there. Your CPAC article, which I hope everybody had a chance to read, back from March 3rd on Medium. You can go to our Twitter feed to read this wonderful article, seemed to reflect your frustrations with the Democrats, with the American left, and sort of their desire to enforce lockstep orthodoxy among their members of that community. And when you came to CPAC, you saw something that was a little bit more diverse that surprised you. Tell us about that what you saw on the left that you found that you needed to push back against.
Yeah, so I was a Democrat for 20 years, from the time I was 18 years old up until a couple of months ago. And to be honest, for the last several years, I kind of turned my brain off to politics. I really just wasn't paying attention. I was very upset when Trump got elected, and I had my little moment of being upset. But then I refocused on life and my career. And the way that I started to wake up to how crazy the left had gotten was, ironically, through knitting, through my favorite hobby that I do every single day. And what happened is that the knitting community got absolutely overtaken by social justice mobs that were going around bullying people. And at some point I was watching this happen and watched really terrible things happen to great people. And I said to myself, these are people that you've aligned yourself politically with. And that was not okay with me. And so then I started really investigating what had happened and looking into things and listening to voices from all different sides. And I realized that this party I had joined when I was 18 had just gone completely off the cliff. And I wasn't comfortable with it anymore. And that's really how I found myself at a Trump rally. I was looking for a different point of view, a different perspective. And then I got the opportunity to go to CPAC not too long after that. And I thought, well, why not? They can't be any crazier than the left at the moment. So why not give them a try?
What do you think was out there in the universe that caused you to be so nervous to go to CPAC? I think a lot of the people who are watching this broadcast are familiar with it, have attended once or several times in the past 20 years. What do you think got into your brain that made you somewhat apprehensive to go in the first place?
Well, I think that anytime you take yourself and you put yourself in a completely unknown position around a new group of people that you just haven't spent time around, it's natural to be nervous. And as someone who was, a Democrat for 20 years, I absolutely had a very distinct perception of what CPAC would be. It would be like, either like frat boys or like older white men, smoking cigars and and it wasn't an image in my head that said, these are really people that you want to spend some time around. But when I got to CPAC, what I was so, I suppose, surprised about was how diverse it was. How many, there were all different age ranges, tons of women, tons of people who the left would call marginalized populations. And, it was a much more diverse, welcoming audience than I had expected.
Do you think that the current leaders of not just the Democrat Party, but say the American left, the people who have taken the Democrat Party and shoved it way to the left of on the American political spectrum recently, especially since 2016. Do you think that they are bringing along with them the masses, that they're accurately reflecting the leadership that by and large Democrats across America want, or have they overstepped?
Oh, I think that they have massively overstepped. And here's the thing, it's the far left. They're the loudest among all of the groups. And one of the things I've really learned on this journey of listening to all different voices is that most people are in the middle. They're in the middle. They have some things that they agree with on the right, and they have some things that they agree with on the left, but they keep their views to themselves because they don't want to offend anyone. They don't want to get into the fight. And so you've got this group of people on the left that are just loud and out there every single day, and we're seeing it now every single day, and you can't avoid them. And so it seems as though that's the majority, but it's really not. But sadly, the leadership of the Democratic Party has essentially followed where they're going and is treating them as though this is the example that we should be following, and I think that's a horrible decision.
Very much like our previous guest, Wayne Dupree, you've become a prolific online broadcaster, creating a channel of alternative information for your audience outside of the major broadcast networks, outside of the major newspapers and publications. Let me ask you, and your opinions are sound and well reasoned. And I think that has a lot to do with the recent growth of your audience. But where do you get your information from? Where can you direct some of our folks, and young people especially, to get good, accurate, solid information, especially in a moment where it just seems like there's a great deal of noise, misinformation, info wars, whatnot, that folks may not know what to trust or believe anymore? Where do you get the stuff, and how do you do your research to form your opinions?
I think the most important thing is that you've got to get your information from a very wide variety of sources. The mistake that I made when I was still a Democrat was I was watching MSNBC almost exclusively. I did not have a wide variety of sources. And so that was one of the things that really caused me some trouble. But, since I woke up, I've been doing my best to get information from everywhere. So I get information from, everything from the Daily Wire all the way to, I still actually do watch MSNBC. I also get information from people on YouTube, like Tim Pool is one of my favorite sources of information. I think he's just great. And it's really a matter of, you've got to put all the, if you can find facts that are agreed upon in the mainstream media and for people on YouTube or from wherever you're pulling your information, if you can take the stuff that they all agree upon, that's probably the truth, because every single one of them is putting their own independent spin on the so-called facts, right? But what they're saying is the same, that's the truth. And if you can whittle down to what they're agreeing upon, then you can really look at it and decide for yourself, do I agree with this? Do I not agree with this? But the biggest thing is, don't allow the editorialization that is going on, especially in places like the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN. It's absolutely awful. Don't let their editorialization influence how you're perceiving the situation.
Let me ask you, as somebody who is familiar with the way that the left works, at CPAC, at ACU, we have a proud tradition that even goes back to our founding in 1964 with William F. Buckley, of being anti-racist, thinking that we support an economy of opportunity for all Americans. And for the past 50 years, has been very reluctant to sort of engage in anything that might be construed as identitarian politics. But it feels like that the world around us has evolved very quickly just in the past 4 months about issues of race, about socioeconomic disparities, and the impact that has on lots of Americans, suburban, urban, rural. Where's your head at as far as the appropriateness of what's happening in the streets across America, pulling down the statues, wanting to blow up Mount Rushmore, Teddy Roosevelt, George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Jesus? Where's your head at as far as removing these monuments? What's the impact of this supposed to be? Is it scrubbing away an unpalatable or offensive history? I mean, what's the end game here? What do you know from your time on the left?
Yeah, so I think that, I think we can all pinpoint when it really started to get out of hand, right? And that was with what happened to George Floyd, which was a tragic murder. I'm just going to say it. And I think the saddest thing to me about this whole affair is that everyone agreed that what happened to George Floyd was wrong. And then it just continued to escalate and get out of control. And I think what we're seeing now with the ongoing protests, because they're still happening, they're just not being covered in the media, and the pulling down of statues and the rewriting of history, we're seeing, opportunists on the left essentially take advantage of this situation to destabilize our society. And I think it's absolutely horrible. Listen, I went to school in Boston when I was a young lass, and the reason I went to school in Boston is I love American history. I love the American Revolution. You get to be right there where it all happened. And when I look at people that are coming out of college today, and I work with them oftentimes in organizations when I'm doing my real job, is they don't understand the history of our country. They've never been taught it, or if they have been taught it, they've been taught that it's a racist history, and that's just absolutely wrong. We have to take these elements of our past and put them in context of the time that they happened in. And pulling down a whole bunch of statues is not going to create a more fair and just society. Having protests every day is not going to create a more fair and just society. And I think that we have to think about what are their actions actually telling us. And for me, when I look at the actions of the protesters and the looters and the rioters, I see people that want to destabilize our society, and that is absolutely terrifying.
I tend to think that there are mechanisms in place. If you want to pull these statues down, you can vote for elected officials who campaign on that. You can start a referendum. There's a public safety aspect of it. If a statue needs to come down, you ought to have professionals taking it down with hard hats and make sure that it's a safe area. But when the mob is activated to go to pull it down with chains willy-nilly, it reflects all of the societal unrest you're talking about, but also is a matter of just keeping people safe while they're out there, hopefully peacefully protesting. Let me ask you, the scrubbing of all of this history and stuff. Is it appropriate for people to be offended by history? I mean, this whole notion of kneeling for the anthem or burning the American flag is 100% offensive by and large to conservatives, and I think a whole wide swath of Americans that may not identify as conservatives because it's offensive. Nonetheless, you'll find freedom-loving conservatives who will say, well, look, the Supreme Court has ruled that this is protected speech and you have to be offended. There's a difference in tolerating offense on the left and the right. I think lots of times folks on the right will say, well, I'm offended, but you get to do that in a free society. On the left, the notion that, you have offended me is enough to want to cancel you, is enough to want to flag you on social media and say, I've been offended. Is that ever going to change on the left, or is this just part of exacting their agenda, making sure that if you say something that's appropriate, that's truthful, that's accurate, but that I may not like as a liberal activist, then we can unleash the hellhounds of censorship on your account? What do you make of all that?
Yeah, so I think what people need to understand is that the battle that's going on right now is not necessarily a battle between left and right. It is a battle between authoritarianism and libertarianism, for lack of a better term. It's people who want the government to control everything versus people who want the government to be as small as possible. And there are authoritarians on the left and there are authoritarians on the right. There are liberals on the left, there are liberals on the right. And I think that people have got to stop treating this as a conversation between like Republicans versus Democrats. That's not what it is right now. It's about, do you want the government to control every aspect of your life or don't you? And in this, I actually find a lot of alignment with conservatives. I mean, listen, one of the things that I loved about CPAC this year was the focus on individual liberties. Like we're aligned there. We might not agree on things like healthcare and immigration and stuff like that, but we can hash those out later as long as we can get around the idea that we don't want the government telling us what to do in every part of our lives.
Dr. Borysenko, where can our CPAC attendees follow you on social media and watch some of your great content?
Yeah, absolutely. drkarlyn.com is the best place to go. It's my kind of hub with all my social media on it. I'm also on Twitter at Dr. Karlyn B, and I am on Parler at Karlyn, just my first name.
You're on Parler as well. Somebody told me it was parlay, as in parlez-vous français, but we're still trying to figure that out.
We'll work on that.
Parler parlay as well, and we look forward to seeing you there. Thanks for taking some time out of your busy schedule to join us, Dr. Borysenko. Okay, folks, before we let you go here, a quick breaking news item. Earlier today, the Supreme Court ruled 5-4 in the June medical decision. Where John Roberts has once again betrayed conservatives by siding with the liberals on the Supreme Court. This decision was a bill that came up that was proposed by a Democrat legislator in Louisiana to compel abortion clinics to meet the same standard as other surgical centers across the state. The Supreme Court knocked this down in what is the wrong decision for life in America. We want to run this little clip for you just to remind you exactly what Planned Parenthood founder Margaret Sanger thought about life in America. Here at the American Conservative Union and at CPAC, we believe every human life is precious, but this is an unforgivable abuse of power from Supreme Court Justice John Roberts, siding with the liberals in this case, after years when he was appointed by Bush of reassuring conservatives that he was going to be on the right side of these issues. So please, some dark words from Planned Parenthood founder Margaret Sanger, and just reflect on that with the rest of your afternoon as one of the many important issues that conservatives are going to need to rally around and organize to preserve the ideals of our founding here in America. Catch us on Monday for another edition of CPAC Live, where we'll be joined by Inez and Jarrett Stepman to have a conversation about woke culture, about socialism America, about the future of the American education system. Look forward to seeing you then.
Do you believe in sin? When I say believe, I don't mean believe in committing sin. Do you believe there is such a thing as sin?
Well, I think the greatest sin in the world is bringing children into the world that have disease from their parents, that have no chance in the world to be a human being, practically. Delinquents, prisoners, all sorts of things just marked when they're born. That, to me, is the greatest sin that people can commit.